I've got a lot of work to do to prepare for drift stick. I made a big, long list of stuff. I started putting the radium fuel cell in, and don't mind the mess. I've got so many things going on here. But I'm waiting on some supplies so I can get it welded in and a few other things. So while I'm waiting on that, I'm gonna go ahead and start on another project. And that project is putting fender flares on the car. I have Origin wide body fenders, but they just aren't quite wide enough for the Just Engineering Super Angle kit. So when I'm drifting and I hit a bump or something, especially at angle, the fender and the tire will touch, and then, you know, stuff like this happens. But I have these fender flares that I think they're like a CBY or CBY knockoff, and I think they're actually meant for 11 AE86, but they're a close enough fit. Because I'm going to keep the Origin fenders because I want the fender vents and the style and stuff, I'm still going to have to do like some work on the fiberglass to get it to fit right, but I don't think it'll be too much. The flare hides the chunked bits quite nicely, and it's just wide enough that the wheel sits inside pretty good. The problem ends up being like up here at the top, there's this big gap, and there's this big gap because this right here, this is where the Origin fender starts to get wider. So I'm gonna see if I can take out some of this here to get it to sit flush, and then I think that'll allow this to settle in tighter as well, so I can fill this area here too and have that sit flush against the bumper. I've got my first little bit marked out here. We'll see how much of a difference that little bit makes. It's getting closer, but not quite. I gotta bring this bit here down. That's too big. That sits pretty good there. I need to touch it up a little bit so it doesn't look so jagged, but it's still pretty far away up top, and fiberglass flexes, so I could just rivet it, and it might hold, but I think instead I'm gonna take a little bit off of the backside here, because, you know, not a lot, but just a little bit to make it sit a little bit more flush on the backside. All right, I think that's the ticket. It's a little bit closer all the way around, and it's not quite perfect up top, obviously, but I think that's as good as it's gonna get, and that should, I think that should smooth out pretty good. So I went ahead and drilled a hole in the fender where this bottom bit over here by the door side lines up, and we're gonna go ahead and use some Clecos to hold it in place so I can see how everything all fits like this before actually going ahead and riveting. That way I've still got some room for adjustment. All right, it's mounted, sort of. I still have a few little things to clean up. Like right here, I gotta clean this up a little bit. And back here a little bit, but that's looking pretty all right. It may not be perfect, because there's definitely some gaps back here, but I think that's okay. I think it's pretty acceptable to me anyway. Right, so now that side's done, it's time to go ahead and do the other side. I'm gonna just fast forward and get that one done real quick. It isn't perfect fitment, like, obviously there's still gonna be some gaps around. Like maybe I didn't actually need to take some material off the backside. But it's not terrible. The fender is floppy, so it's not even, the fender's not even all the way out, so there's a gap there. And then when I
riveted, or when I put the top one down, this bulged out down here. So there's a big old gap back there, but I don't know. I'm okay with it.
It looks way better than the way it looked before with all the crusty, crunchy fenders. So I guess we'll get these things paint matched and see what it looks like. I've got a few other things I need to paint. I did some repairs on my spoiler, so that needs to be painted. I have a new over fender for this side. That needs to be painted because there's a chunk taken out of it there. And then I have a new rear bumper to go on. So I'm hoping the new rear bumper shows up this week so that way I can get everything off and prepped and ready for paint. So I can spray paint and then spray clear and be ready to go because I need to let the body part sit and like degas, right? I need to let everything vent off so that when I go to put on the livery, because we're gonna get a livery this year, that way I don't get air bubbles forming because of everything's degassing still. I'm standing in the trunk of my car because I'm gonna put my fuel cell back here. Some people want to put the fuel cell all the way up against like the rear firewall here, sometimes even inside of the cabin of the vehicle. They'll just build a shell around it to block it off from the actual cabin of the vehicle. And that all comes down to what you plan on using the space for in the future. The reason why I'm putting it back here is because I'm thinking about the trunk usage for the future. I want the trunk to be rear and low. That way I can still use the trunk. I'm taking this car on Drift Week 5, so I want to be able to put things back here. I just want to say this, I love welding, but I also hate welding. Because look at the stupid space I'm in trying to weld this crap. Ta-da! Ta-da! All right, a couple days later, you saw that I got the flares on and radium fuel cell is in. I got it plumbed up here, so I still have a little bit left to do for the fuel cell. It's plumbed at least, but I think I need to extend one of the lines. I gotta do the fuel pump wiring, so a few things like that, but it's like 75% of the way there. All the hard stuff is done. Now it's just wiring and stuff. But I got a package today. I'm very excited about it. I got a new battery from XS Power. They sent me a bunch of stickers. I am super excited because this is a new sponsor for me this year. Another one. This is fantastic. Okay, so I need a new battery. I've been running like a motorcycle battery, an ETX20 LBS, which is, I think it's like the size of like a typical size, like a power sports battery. And I think that like Braille and Odyssey and all these other lightweight battery companies, pretty much what they do is they slap a sticker on this size battery for one of theirs. And I just got the generic one from O'Reilly because I used to work at O'Reilly, so I did some magic and cross-referenced some parts way back in the day. And this one I've been running for years, but I decided it was time to upgrade. The battery is pretty much dying. It just didn't have quite the amperage. I noticed that when I was pressing the brakes, I could, you know, as the lights would kick on, the fuel pumps would like change pitch a little bit. So I knew I needed a new battery. And I looked around looking for a battery, and I went with XS Power. Not because they sponsored me. Okay, that was kind of an outcome of me wanting their battery. But because they're one of the only, I think they are the only battery company I've ever seen support drifting. They sponsored East 10, I think it was East 10 a few years back. So having like a performance battery company support drifting, you know, seems like something small, but that's actually really cool because that's a generic part that every single car needs to have. And so when you have a company that supports drifting with something like that, it's just super cool. It's a universally applicable battery. So the battery I picked up is their D925, which is a common size for power sports and motorsports. This is like the mid-size battery as far as like the lightweight batteries go. You've got a small, which is what I used to have, and you've got this, the 925 or D925, and then you also have the larger size, which is a little bit more than this one. So because it's a common size, there are battery boxes and stuff like that available. So I got a battery box coming, and so I can get it mounted. And like this is the same kind of size battery that ran like most of the sand rails out of the dunes. If you saw that video I put out, which was super nuts driving a 1300 horsepower sand rail. I realized that if that was enough cranking gas to start these like supercharged V8 cars, it could start my little supercharged 4-cylinder just fine. And it should have enough amp hours that in case something happens, like my alternator quits, I should be able to drive a little ways without it draining the battery, which is what I wanted for drift weeks. Thank you so much, Excess Power. You guys will see pictures once I get them out. I also really like the colors. The white and the black is a little different. Now, I've kind of reached a stopping point here. I need to pull the diff to rebuild it. The backlash is a little loose, so before driving it, you know, however many hundreds of miles or 1,000 miles on drift week, I need to have the diff rebuilt and reliable. So I started pulling it apart and I hit a little bit of a snag. This is a Volvo rear axle, so I have to use 2-piece hub adapters to go from the Volvo 5x108 to the Corolla 4on114 because I have a bunch of cool Corolla wheels. So you don't want to have to use Volvo wheels. And you know, it's got these twin piston rear brakes. I also have a dual caliper bracket that I'll probably put on at some point. I don't want to put it on before drift week because I don't want to change a bunch of stuff, but yeah, they make stuff like that for them. I run this axle because this is the axle shaft for it. It's 1 1/8 inches about thick at the splines, and then down here it gets fatter. That's about 1.5 inches. So super beefy axle, super strong, and the ring gear is like, I want to say the ring gear is like 8 1/4 inch. Super thick. It doesn't have great gearing options, doesn't have great limited slip options, but for a welded diff, it's fantastic, and it's about the right width for a Corolla. You can re-drill the 4on114, but I wanted to use hub adapters because I didn't feel like drilling anything. So I got one of them off, right? There's 2 pieces, and they're held together by these Allen bolts. Well, I ran into an issue using a cheap socket that's snapped. So I went and talked to my neighbor who sells snap-on tools, and he hooked me up with a nice snap-on socket, but, well, it's not supposed to be twisty like that. So I got 8 out of the 10 bolts out, and now I just have these last 2. I used the long socket, and really I should have been using a stubby socket. So I've got a stubby socket ordered. That should be here soon. And then I should be able to get the axle out and rebuild the diff. That's pretty much the last major thing aside from bodywork. I'm waiting on a rear bumper to show up so then I can get everything prepped and sprayed. But I do have one other thing that I'm very excited about. I have a sound system. This is like a sound bar meant for like a UTV, like a side-by-side, and it bolts on to a roll bar. The size is a little larger than what I have. It goes to like a 1.75 inch or 2 inch. My roll cage is 1.5 inch. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld a bar across from the 2 down bars back here, probably somewhere near the top, so that way I can hang it down from that and have my speakers hanging from there, so we can have audio. One of the funny things about that sound bar is it has LED lights and I can't turn them off. It's like RGB, so I can have it like flashing with the music or changing or whatever, or I can leave it solid. So I'm just gonna leave it solid and probably red because that's best for like seeing at night, and that way it's not blinding me. But yeah, thanks for watching. I guess tune in next time. I'll get the diff, axle rebuilt, and we'll go drive the car with the new fuel cell in, get some thoughts on that, also with the new battery. I'm gonna do a proper battery relocation. So I've got some supplies. If you're doing a battery relocation, you probably wanna check this out, because there's a lot of things that I get overlooked, I think, a lot of times in the battery relocation, and I should be addressing all of them. Thanks. See you next time.